So Black Myth Wukong, it feels very weird. The negativity that is towards like Black Myth Wukong, I feel is some of the most forced and confusing shit that I've seen.
Now, ever so often, there's a game that comes out that meets and exceeds the expectations of the players. It blows our minds. It's so good, but for some odd reason, it doesn't meet the same expectations for games media. Our interests aren't aligned. Our perspectives are not necessarily the same, and there's conflict in that. And I think that Black Myth Wukong is one of those games. And don't get me wrong, the game reviewed very well. It got over an 80 on most review sites. But with that said, up until the game's release, and then even after the game's release, it was under a constant barrage of negative criticism that had nothing to do with the game whatsoever. And in that, the game never really got a fair shake. At least not.
Well, it didn't get a fair shake, and it was obvious that it didn't. And a lot of the reviews that people gave for Black Myth Wukong contextualized the review alongside a slanderous article that was proven to be false that defamed the company that made the game, with proven lies that they never issued a correction or a retraction from.
In my eyes, now, 2024 has been an absolutely insane year for games. There are so many great games to play, and if you're one of those people that are out there that are like, gaming is dying, let me be the first to tell you, you are
a fucking idiot. It's not dying. It is one of the best years for gaming that we've ever had.
Play more games, or just not the same ones over and over again. The list, once I get into some of the Game of the Year contenders, it's going to blow your mind, because I honestly forgot how many games even came out this year.
Yeah, it's fucking insane. People are talking about like anti-China sentiment. I think that where is the anti-China sentiment with Genshin Impact with those same people? It's not there. So I don't think that's really true.
This isn't about the award. It's about the recognition that these studios deserve, the reward they deserve, beyond just making money. It's making sure that it's known why these games are great so that other publishers and studios can see, hey, this is what it is. This is how we make a game that the players love. And it's not, again, just not the money. But already I'm starting to see games media want to preemptively push back about Black Myth Wukong being in the Game of the Year category, and we're going to talk about that. Before that, today's sponsor.
Yeah, of course, right? I mean, like, I think it's a huge issue. Riot's American company got bought by Tencent. Yeah, true. It's about jealousy. I think that people are just trying to shit on this, and I guarantee you other publishers and studios are researching market and not looking at Game Awards. I think that that's true, but it's also fair to look at the Game Awards and see how it happens that's biased, and then call that out, because I think it's bad.
War Thunder is a massive free-to-play, large-scale multiplayer game where you can fight anyone from around the world using ground vehicles, aircraft, helicopters, and naval vessels from the mid-20th century to present. The game is available on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. What truly sets War Thunder apart is its commitment to realism and immersion. The graphics and sound design continually evolve, pulling you into battles that feel authentically intense. You're not just playing...
The most expensive tank in the pay-to-win track for War Thunder is a tank from Israel. And I think that any American player that plays War Thunder should get that tank for free, since we actually paid for it with our tax dollars.
A game, you're experiencing the heart-pounding chaos of combat. Whether you're barreling through enemy lines in a tank, providing crucial air support, or engaging in thrilling dogfights, the freedom to choose your combat style is up to you. The game features various technologies such as night vision devices, smoke screens, and even nuclear explosions, which can turn the tide of battle in unexpected ways. A recent update called Dance of Dragons is a game changer. Thanks to this update, you can now take command of a variety of French combat vessels and take control of two iconic American aircraft, the A-10 Thunderbolt II attack plane and the F-111 tactical bomber. In addition, there are many other combat vehicles that are available and dozens of improvements at the request of the community. So are you ready to join the fight? Download War Thunder today for free using the link in the pinned comment or description below.
I used to have
if you're a new
tank.
player or returning after a long break, you'll score some exclusive rewards, rentals for the P-40E-1 aircraft and M4 tank, unique skins, and 100,000 silver lions. Don't miss out. Thank you, War Thunder, for sponsoring this video. We have had a monstrous year in games, and it's wild to think that it's not even over yet with more releases right around the corner. This is about the time of year that Game of the Year candidates are being discussed and debated, and this year we have a lot of difficult choices to make. Dragon's Dogma 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth...
Dragon's Dogma 2 is not even remotely in the running for Game of the Year. The game has so many flaws, and it's so problematic. No, it's not even remotely close.
Helldivers 2, Paper Mario, The Thousand
Helldivers 2, not even remotely close.
Year Door, Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, Persona 3
Definitely not Game of the Year. Prince of Persia was good, but is not Game of the Year.
Reloaded, Metaphor ReFantazio, and Silent Hill 2 Remake are among the highest scoring games that we've had from reviewers this year. That's 8 games when only 6 games can be qualified as candidates. We're not even mentioning the stockpile of games that were scored just under that, with titles like Stellar Blade, Black Myth Wukong, Tekken 8, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Unicorn Overlord, Space Marine 2, and more. 2024 has been packed with games, but only a few titles are deserving of being crowned King of the Year, and for many players, that game is Black Myth Wukong. James Throtton of The Gamer penned an article...
Yeah, I'm going to be honest, guys. I think Black Myth Wukong is Game of the Year, and I don't even think anything else is remotely close. I do. I think it's just so far and away better. It's like, and it's the reason why is that it's not one thing, it's everything. It's that the combat is really good, the storytelling is really good, the graphics are really good, the cinematics are really good, like the voice acting is really good. Everything about it is S tier.
Titled, If Black Myth Wukong isn't nominated for Game of the Year, fans are going to be insufferable.
James, I love how the implication there is that the fans are the ones that are in the wrong, not the people. Like, what is the logic? So if all of the people that are saying that this game should be Game of the Year, why exactly does that happen? I don't even understand that. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. So, like, it's like, yeah, we're the ones that are insufferable. Maybe it's you.
Writes, Black Myth Wukong is a very good action game, taking the Souls-like formula and stretching it into a boss rush format. Its popularity even surpasses that of its inspirations, garnering millions of players in mere days. It's a genuine contender for the Game Awards, but with how stacked 2024 is shaping up to be, competition is fierce. Polygon recently updated its Game of the Year frontrunner list, while the Golden Joystick Awards announced its 6 nominees for this year's PC and console Game of the Year categories. Black Myth Wukong is nowhere to be seen outside of smaller categories, and so TikTok right now is a deluge of angry gamers declaring that games media is corrupt and that it's all a part of some wider conspiracy.
I think it is. I think that's exactly what's happening. I think that Black Myth Wukong is indicated, and I'm just going to say it straight out. I think that's exactly what's happening, and it's evident to any person with a brain. You have a games media hegemony of people that all behave and have the exact same opinions, that all cross-reference each other for some form of credibility, and they've all collectively gotten together and tried to push a false narrative that Black Myth Wukong is a mediocre game and that the studio that makes it is sexist. This is ridiculous. And for me to think that that's not a factor, or that like this just randomly happened, it's insulting to the intelligence of any person that is like reading this. Yes, it absolutely is a deluge of angry gamers, because that's exactly what it is. It is a conspiracy. They're not giving it to them. It's the same reason why the conspiracy was to give this game an 8. It's not an 8. This game's easily a 9 or a 10. To say that the game had no women representation, yeah, because you didn't get to part 4. It's unbelievable. Yeah, people think it's part of a conspiracy. That's because it is.
The game was not rigged from the start. It's just been a very, very competitive year.
You have to keep in mind that IGN rated Black Myth Wukong, I think, an 8, and it rated Dragon Age Veilguard a 9. It is a conspiracy. It's happening, and it's right in front of you. And Concord a 7. It's happening right in front of you. Everybody can see it, and you're made to feel like a fool whenever you see what's in plain sight. It's absolutely happening. Sorry. It's just truth.
Wider conspiracy. The game was not rigged from the start. It's just been a very, very competitive year. This week alone, we've had Silent Hill 2 Remake, Metaphor ReFantazio, and Dragon Ball Sparking Zero, 3 critically acclaimed hits that are all vying for the spotlight with equal fervor. Earlier this year, we saw the launch of Astrobot, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Tekken 8, Helldivers 2, and Dragon's Dogma. That's not to mention...
If you think that Dragon's Dogma should be in the running for Game of the Year over Black Myth Wukong, you are retarded. That's it. Like, there's no other way to look at it.
In the stellar year it's been for indies. Black Myth Wukong, while good, we scored it 4 stars, just doesn't measure up to the great.
We scored it 4 stars. I love how they always like referencing back to their own scoring, as if this is some sort of like indication of credibility. Yeah, we're not biased because if you look at our previous bias, it will reinforce our current one. It's so ridiculous. I really like Dragon's Dogma 2. I did as well, but I know that it's not Game of the Year. Also, think about, again, that Stellar Blade wasn't mentioned here either.
For indies. Black Myth Wukong, while good...
It's an obvious bias, and any normal person, any logical, reasonable person can see that.
Scored it 4 stars, just doesn't measure up to the greats. Hell, it's not even the best Souls-like this year, as that award goes to Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. For those that have used Wukong as fuel in a culture war since before it was even released, its absence on these lists is an attack.
It is. It absolutely is. And the people that used it in the culture war were the journalists that slandered the company based off of their misunderstanding of the Chinese language. That's exactly what happened. Any normal person can see that. I'm sorry, but like, it's obviously happening. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was proven. And, well, actually, no, that's true. It was deliberate.
Ploy by Games Media for reasons, even though it has an open critic aggregate of 82. There's one big argument cropping up across Reddit and slowly replacing all the goth girls on my For You page as to why it deserves to be nominated. It sold well. James, I will speak for those that you are arguing against. Black Myth Wukong doesn't deserve to be nominated because of its sales. It deserves to be nominated because it is the first ever release from a studio, an inexperienced studio, that made a stunningly gorgeous game with great combat, a compelling story, beautiful music, incredibly detailed and culturally accurate environments, some of the most unique boss encounters I've seen in a game like this, and themes that we don't often see in games. It was original, fresh, and most importantly, fun. And while many of the games that were mentioned in this article are incredible games, they are just copies of previous titles or even remakes. The industry...
I personally think that remakes and DLC shouldn't be able to win Game of the Year. This is just like my own personal 2 cents, so everybody's going to have their own opinion on it, but I don't think that DLC and remakes should win Game of the Year. I don't think it's fair.
Should be celebrating and rewarding studios that work this hard, take a risk, and deliver something altogether new. And we're not even mentioning how the game sold at a fair price. I am so exhausted by this. Do you want to know why players think there's some grand conspiracy? Do you want to know why?
Why does everybody think this? Maybe the reason why everybody thinks it is because it's true. Has it ever occurred to you that maybe when everybody collectively comes to a conclusion of something, that maybe there could be some reason why they think this is happening? $60 is a fair price? Absolutely, it's a fair price for a game. It's the same price that was in 2005.
They think there's some media bias. Well, you're not doing yourself any service when you try to minimize the game at every given turn. Called it a Souls-like. It's not even a Souls-like. I actually did the same thing in a video too, so I'm actually not going to take points away from you for that. But I don't understand where this idea that this game somehow became something that the culture war LARPers had latched onto even before its release, because to my recollection, the only thing that I can remember is Games Media were the ones that were pushing these allegations from IGN against Game Science through different articles, and then also at the exact same time, there were a ton of people...
And they were unsubstantiated allegations that referenced and referred to unknown sources in nondescript ways to make them seem like they were more valid and important than they were.
Pining over tweets that were completely mistranslated. If anything, it was games media that was dragging this game into the culture war, not the other way around.
Yeah.
It's just not true.
Yeah, nobody was talking about this game being woke or anything like that, or like anti-woke, anything like that, like before they put out those articles. Nobody was thinking about that. It's the same thing as about how they talked about how the game, like, do you guys remember the reviews about how, like, the game didn't have any women in it? As if, like, by the way, having women in the game is some sort of indicator of quality. What a retarded premise to begin with. But on top of that, the only thing that showed me is that all the reviewers that played this game didn't actually beat the game because they never saw the full story of the game. They only played probably the first chapter and then they quit it. It's just like, it's so brain dead and just, of course people are going to be thinking this is part of a culture war because they were the ones that started attacking it. That's the reason why. They're just mad that people didn't buy their bullshit hit piece on the game being sexist. Yeah, I think so too. Was there also the Game Science turned down Sweet Baby Money too? I don't think that's accurate.
The entire time before this game's release, and this is the reason why I say the game didn't get a fair shake, is that every single time this game was brought up, it was always with a qualifier.
Yeah.
Black Myth Wukong is a fantastic action game, but there was this report from IGN that was also based on some mistranslations, but we don't really care about that much. But anyway, they said
there were some people that reviewed it and contextualized their review around it. And so, no women in Failguard either, so they can't define what a woman is. Yeah, crazy people can't just enjoy the game without inserting politics into it. Yeah, I think this is a huge issue, and I will be doing a. I'll tell you guys this. So I said that I was going to do this, and I never did it. The Shame Awards. So what are the Shame Awards? I will be completely transparent. I didn't do it because of my relation with like OTK, Mad Mushroom, and everything. They thought it might make us look bad. Problem solved. So now we're doing it. And so now what we're going to be doing is we are going to be looking at the worst representation, worst graphics, most garbage performance, biggest Mary Sue character. And we are doing this by the end of the year. I am very fucking excited. It's good. Yep. It's very, very good.
Some things, or they do some things that we
Somebody
don't
needs to
necessarily
do
agree
this.
with. Black Myth Wukong, we're giving an 8 out of 10, but just to let you know, we saw some tweets that were also mistranslated, and we didn't really like exactly what they said or the things that this company stands for. It was always like that. The game never got a fair chance, at least in the media light. And that's not the same for...
No, they never gave it a fair chance. Absolutely not. And you see this all the time. So, like, here's a great example. When Jesse Ventura ran for governor of, I believe, Minnesota, they introduced him as a former wrestler rather than a politician, or rather than any of his other jobs. And there are always these ways that media uses to delegitimize and make people less valid. And it's like these like really soft like changes in vocabulary that the average person can't detect and can't see. Yeah, former Navy SEAL or something like that. No, yeah, like a former wrestler. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so, and it's very obvious that this happens. And I find this to be a huge problem. And I'll tell you guys, I hate media. I absolutely hate them. I think that they are 100% against the will of the people. I think that they exist as a parasite. And 9 times out of 10, they make the world worse and not better. I hate them. They're scummy as fuck. Absolutely. And it's true with games media. It's true with political media. It's true with all media. Former minor. Yeah, there's another one. Like, I don't think that there is enough. I don't think that there is enough vitriol for the amount of just obvious propaganda and lies that they put out all the time.
every other game that was out there. All the rest of the games never had any
And
of
this
this
is the
kind
same
of
thing.
stuff. And the worst part is again, all of these things were alleged, never even proven, yet they were touted as fact. They were included in game reviews.
Well, they were alleged also, by the way, they were alleged by anonymous sources. So it's not only it's not only that, oh, this might have not happened. It's also that we don't even know who said it.
Game review videos, penned reviews. You don't think that's too far? What do you think is the purpose of that when you put that stuff into an article other than to minimize the game and hopefully steer players away from buying it?
That's their goal.
That's the point.
Yeah.
You want to understand and know why players think
That's
there's
exactly
some
what they're
grand
trying to do.
conspiracy?
Because
it's
there
not
is.
hard for them to jump to that conclusion when it's staring them.
Well, it's right there. Yeah, it's not jumping to conclusion. We've been fucking Ubered there by the people themselves.
2 inches from their face. On the topic of the game's sales, the writer continues with, it's hardly a compelling defense, but sales figures have long been used as evidence that supposedly anti-woke games like Wukong are what your everyday gamer really wants. In reality, it was a success because the game was marketed to the enormous untapped Chinese demographic.
Well, we all have to keep in mind that Chinese players and video game people are only weighted as 3/5 of an American player or a Western player. They're not a full entire gamer. So you shouldn't really think about Chinese gamers the same as Western gamers. They're separate, but they're not equal. Sorry.
It was only made worse when streamers were supposedly sent guidelines asking them not to mention feminist propaganda or politics. Black Myth Wukong became the poster child for the most toxic, vocal gamers on the internet, and everything since its launch has only worked to further that image.
Another funny thing about that is that if this retard knew anything about the way that China works, the reason why you're not supposed to mention feminist propaganda or politics is because a lot of times China has those restrictions on companies themselves because they restrict speech in China in a very large way. And those restrictive speech expectations were translated to a marketing agency and it wasn't westernized. So if this person actually knew anything about the culture that they're trying to understand or actually really completely slander in this case, they would know that the reason why this happened actually had nothing to do with the game, and it had everything to do with the company just doing this out of an abundance of caution to avoid ire from the government. The same thing is in other studios that make games in China as well. It's pathetic to me. It's just so pathetic.
Gamers on the internet, and everything since its launch has only worked to further that image. Wukong was a monumental hit. There's no denying that. Within days, it skyrocketed to the 7th most played game on Steam of all time, the peak concurrent player count of 2.4 million players, but numbers aren't everything.
Then what is?
Banana, the viral clicker game that generates Steam Marketplace items, has a higher 24-hour peak than Black Myth Wukong right now by over 100,000 players. Avengers: Infinity War and Spider-Man: No Way Home are among the highest-grossing films of all time, but they didn't walk away with the pinnacle Oscar for good reason.
Avengers: Infinity War should have won Oscars. It was an S-tier movie, and it was a cinematic accomplishment that we haven't seen probably more than like a dozen times. It was the culmination of a 10-year story that has been built up and translated into film and put together. It's not even remotely close. Like, I love how there's these people that think that, like, wow, like, I'm so smart. I'm somehow, like, mentally superior because I don't like comic book movies. It's just like, that's like Reddit tier intelligence. That like, oh, comic book movies are like low quality. It was an amazing movie. Any normal person could see that.
Sales do not equal quality, but Black Myth Wukong has been weaponized in a culture war ever since it was announced, and it doing well has only been used as ammunition to argue that games media is out of touch with gamers. Not being nominated...
They are. Games media is absolutely out of touch with gamers. If they weren't out of touch, they wouldn't be doing mass layoffs. The reason why they're doing mass layoffs is because they're not making enough money. And the reason why they're not making enough money is because the products that they're putting out don't have an audience that they can make enough money with them on. It's very simple. Anybody could see that. Like, I just... Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Remember, mass layoffs are hitting the Western studios the most? Well, not only are they hitting them the most, do you know what Capcom is doing? Capcom is hiring people.
For any game.
Also, again, From Software recently announced that they were raising the baseline salary at their company. So this problem is not with games; it's with the specific people that are making games. From Software is rising wages. Yeah, Bandai increased wages. Yeah, there you go.
With the Year Awards, it's October. It's likely going to be in the mix for a lot of sites and still could be up for many categories at the Game Awards, is just more fuel to prove that point. It hasn't upset fans because they think it's a good game deserving to be among the best. It has upset fans because they see its absence as an attack in their one-sided feud.
It's crazy the amount of gaslighting that an article like this can do, because the one-sided feud... Well, what about when you started writing articles about it and saying that it was bad? How is that one-sided? It's dishonest. Yeah, exactly. It's amazing how this happens. They started it. They absolutely started it. And also, I think that a lot of people thought the game was deserving because it was the best. Like this idea that, like, oh, people only like Black Myth Wukong because it's a non-woke game. Nobody thinks that. That's stupid. Like, it's unbelievable how dishonest these people are.
As we edge nearer the big celebratory end-of-the-year closer that is the Game Awards, we are going to see this outrage spiral. If Black Myth Wukong doesn't get a nomination for the main award, it has a few competitors to shut out in Best Action. Its fans will see that as a personal slight. We're witnessing it already, and I've seen my colleagues get attacked.
Well, they will see that as a personal slight because it is a personal slight. It's like if you look at the sun, you'll see that it will burn your eyes. If you put your hand on something that's hot, you will see that it will burn your hand. Yes, that's correct, because it is.
Over the past year just for covering the game. If fans are this riled up by an award ceremony many self-proclaim they've never heard of, or a list of frontrunners that means very little, then I can't see being snubbed from the Game Awards going down well.
Of course not.
Man, the lack of self-awareness when saying that the sales of the game were used as ammunition in a culture war, while you yourself are focusing purely on the sales of the game to minimize the entire discussion around the game. That's interesting. It's convenient to go after the outrage of those.
There's also another big problem that, like, a lot of the writing that's on these websites they're very bad. Like, these people are not very persuasive. And they're basically the writing is either equivalent to Dragon Age Veilguard, or it's a theater kid that's trying to show off that he owns a thesaurus. There's no, like, genuine, like, good, like, like, communication that has any form of edge to it at all.
Who can't voice their concerns properly because the writer is absolutely right. Sales does not mean a game should be Game of the Year. If sales were the leading factor, then Baldur's Gate 3 should have lost to Hogwarts Legacy, or Call of Duty should have won for 5 years straight since it was the best-selling game since 2017. There are a slew of other factors here that should be discussed, but the writer and other media pundits aren't taking the time to discuss that. They're just hand-waving the angry gamers and throwing it out into the bin with the rest of the culture war commentary. Now, my question is,
Which, by the way, they do all the time. Like, you have to keep in mind that this whole idea of, like, a culture war, people that play video games that are, quote, capital G gamers, they're on the defense of that. Gaming was fine. Everything was great with gaming. Then you had people come into gaming and expect changes, appropriations, and exceptions, and different types of modifications to it. And now they're changing it to be the way that they want it. So what is this like? It's a culture war, but they're the ones that have inserted themselves into this space and then tried to change the space in a way that people don't want. They are the aggressors. They're the ones that are trying to do this. Other people are just trying to play video games.
That on the topic of game sales, the Chinese player base is used to minimize the overall impact of the game's sales, success, and popularity. Again, to quote the writer, the game was a monumental hit. There's no denying that. Only to follow it up with, but it succeeded because there was an untapped Chinese market of players.
Yeah.
Like, those players don't even count? Why aren't we having a discussion on why, censorship aside, Western games haven't been able to penetrate that market as effectively as Black Myth Wukong? Especially
because they're bad. It's obvious. What are we talking about? It's obvious.
When there are that many players that could make that much of an impact on a game's sales. Black Myth Wukong is just as deserving as any other title that could go up there for Game of the Year.
Sure.
That's not saying that those games aren't worthy either. They are. But the thing is that it just feels like the coverage around this game, the discussions around this game, have just felt off.
It's the same thing that happened with Stellar Blade. And it's the same thing that happened with Dragon Age the Veilguard. It's very obvious that games media has their favorites, and they're looking at this guy, Call of Duty 6, War with Saddam, is Black Myth Wukong's bad? This is like some what am I even doing? You're just going to get banned. I don't need to pull you up and argue with you. You're just going to get banned. Anyway, as I said, we're going to try to stop. We're going to stop doing that in stream. Just ban them and move on. I apologize, guys. We're going to do our best. We don't need to waste everybody's time with this. Anyway, there were a lot of games that have happened, and it's been very obvious that, and Concord is another good example, is that these games come out and it's very obvious that there's a bias that's being expressed with games media. And you see multiple points on a line, but multiple points on a graph, but the moment that you draw the line, you're seen as a conspiracy theorist. No. I'm sorry. No. If you want people to think that you're not doing a conspiracy, then stop doing things that look like a conspiracy.
Purposefully dishonest in a lot of ways. Black Myth Wukong was incredibly popular. It was incredibly popular with the Chinese because it was the first game that really represented their culture and history in a way that could bridge the gap between nations. Players around the world loved it. They connected with it. And because of that, it brought down cultural boundaries. We don't see that very often.
And that's what's so crazy about it, is that we're not talking about the fact that, we can now have a shared experience with Chinese gamers, and we can have a game that we all know and love, and we can talk about it, that more closely brings gamers around the world together because of that shared experience. We're not talking about any of that. We're talking about some bullshit accusation. Fucking games journalist is obviously based on money, what people don't understand. They'll write whatever the fuck they're told to write. I honestly wish that it was that simple.
Should be something that everybody should be cheering for and happy for. That is the power of this hobby. That is what it can accomplish at times, but we're losing sight of that. I think this all loops back to the fact that game science did not bend the knee in fealty to games media when they started hurling accusations at them, baseless accusations at them, and demanded an answer.
And this is basically what games media does, and this is what media in general does, is that they make up lies about you, and then they try to force you to correct their lies, which then creates a power structure around necessitating their existence, and you are reinforcing that power structure. And the reason why games media specifically hated Black Myth Wukong is because Black Myth Wukong refused to play into that power dynamic. Whenever they asked questions about, any of these accusations, they just said, we're here to talk about the game and that's it. And so what that does is it effectively completely removes what their power play is in the relationship. They didn't bend the knee? Yeah, exactly. Do you think it's some wounded pride that people feel? No, I think that you always have anti-China sentiment, but I don't think that that's really the causal factor for why people are talking about this game in this way. They retaliate by slandering the game. Well, it's not just that. It's basically they label the game as bad, and then the labeling of the game as bad creates a presupposition that you have to correct their bad labeling. But correcting their bad labeling creates also the implicit understanding that that label matters and what they're saying matters. So the only way that you can win is by not playing the game. You just simply do not engage with that type of behavior. They use smear tactics? They do, and it's shame tactics, exactly.
Said no comment. That has nothing to do with the game or anything else right now, and they didn't feel that it was in good faith, and they just ignored it entirely. And I think that games media as a whole took offense to that. They didn't like that too much. They don't like it when their power and position is questioned, when their authority, or what little they have left of it, is questioned. This should be a game that we should be celebrating because of the fact that it broke down cultural boundaries. Yeah. Beyond that, it was a game that was absolutely gorgeous. It was coming from a studio that this is the first game that they were releasing. It came out relatively polished, fresh-feeling combat, boss encounters that we've never even seen before, with attack stylings we haven't seen, environments we've never been in, atmosphere that was absolutely fantastic. They went out and they scanned real-life statues and architecture to try to make sure that the game had the most authentic rendition possible, and they delivered on it. The game was absolutely incredible. The stop-motion animations, the anime cutscenes, and a bunch of different style of art. It was great. It was such a good game. But all of that isn't being discussed. Instead, it's all locked behind social politics. Exactly. Black Myth Wukong was nothing short of a revelation for me. The game was a breath of fresh air in a world that is drowning in microtransactions and endless...
I was so happy playing this game because the game was... I felt like I was playing Elden Ring whenever I was playing this game because of how big it was, and I could just log on and stream every day, and I would be looking forward to being able to play it again.
Live service models. Much like Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring, it was just a straightforward video game that focused on delivering a great experience without the baggage of modern gaming trends. Selling it at a fair price really made it shine as a prime example of what players have been craving, a complete, immersive experience that doesn't feel like it's constantly trying to upsell you. Like I said before, honestly, it's just a damn good video game.
It's crazy that nobody's even talking about the fact that it doesn't have any microtransactions and it was a feature complete game on release. There wasn't some big issue with the game or something like that. I'm sure some people had performance issues, the same as they do with every game. But for the most part, it was pretty much completely done.
Not a professional reviewer, but playing Black Myth Wukong was an awe-inspiring journey for me that I can't stop thinking about. From the moment that I started, I was blown away by its visuals, its gameplay, its music. Every single boss fight felt exhilarating, and I found myself savoring every single moment rather than trying to just rush and finish the game. It's a game that didn't just entertain, it resonated on a deeper level, reminding me why I fell in love with video games in the first place. Now, with that...
That's one of the things, too, is that I think that the game feels like a video game. And a lot of games nowadays don't feel like old video games. I think you can compare, if you look at Black Myth Wukong, if you look at Space Marine 2, or if you look at Metaphor ReFantazio, you can see that the level of quality with that game and the level of immersion and the level of escapism that game has is something that you just don't get whenever you play a game like Concord or with Dragon Age.
Said the other games that are out there are genuine contenders. I don't want this video to come off like Black Myth Wukong should be the only game of the year and no other game deserves it. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was absolutely phenomenal. While I know that there's some people out there that think the game doesn't deserve a spot because it's a remake, it's not. It's a full-on reimagining the combat, the storytelling, how events play out, the music, the atmosphere. All of it makes for a game that's deserving of the crown. Helldivers 2, despite its controversies, was, for all intents and purposes, the game to beat this year. It sold tens of millions of copies. It felt like a trip back to the old days of Halo 2 and Halo 3 post-launch, where friends are asking when you're going to get on, you're staying up way too late playing the game, and all you could do was think about what was going to happen in the game next. I just recently started playing Metaphor ReFantazio, and I'll be honest with you guys, it's likely this year's game of the year. It makes huge improvements in turn-based games. It has music that has no right being as good as it is. The set pieces and art direction go from breathtaking to nightmare-inducing, and it has character writing and stories that show quality, care, and the authenticity that players have been complaining for years that game studios can't touch.
How the fuck do you lose to this fight? This guy was a joke. Like, this shit was so easy. How you dying on this?
Ham-fisting those themes in. It is the perfect example of how to do topics like diversity and inclusivity the right way.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize that this isn't about one game deserving a title over another. Every title mentioned has its own merits and fan bases, and they're all worthy of recognition in their own right. Black Myth Wukong, however, stands out for its originality and its cultural significance, but also for how this game has been mishandled by the media. It's a testament to how hard game science worked on their game and the fresh perspective that they bring. After all, that's what games should be about, creating experiences that are resonating and bringing us together, not just the ones that fit into a narrow definition of success that is made up by a handful of writers. You know, I'm starting
to... people that, like, are not representative at all of what gamers actually want.
To realize that access journalism doesn't work in both ways. Yeah. You know, because they want to make sure that they're trying to stay in line, that they're doing their best to be able to hold on to their contacts, their insider information, get their keys and their codes, and make sure that they can hold on to their jobs and their relevance. But on the other end, when it comes to some of these smaller studios and publishers, they desperately need the help of games media to be able to be noticed, to get in the front of the eyes of players in the first place. Get their trailers out there, get some articles written and things like that.
You don't need to do that anymore. All you need to do, if you have a really good game, is you post it on my subreddit. And then, if it's good, I'll watch the trailer. It'll get upvoted. And then I'll put out a clip or a video of the game. And it will get more engagement and more views than all of these games websites put together. Problem solved. Don't worry about it.
Get them in the algorithms and whatnot. And I think that some of these journalists that are out there view that as an opportunity for them to throw their weight around. That's where they get to be the bully this time. They get to push everybody else around and tell them the way that it's going to be. And I think that Black Myth Wukong stood in opposition to that, and they didn't like it too much. And it might not be all of them. I'm not going to say it's every single one of them. There's some damn good journalists that are still out there. I know you guys are probably shaking your heads. No, there's no way. Believe me, they exist. I have a few of them that are out there that are some of my favorites. But with that said, I think that's the case here for Black Myth Wukong. You know, it's not about sales and it's not about scores. It's about fairness and image. And I just do not think...
they're not fair. They're not fair. They're biased, and everybody can see it. And trying to patronize the people that are recognizing this and, like, make them feel stupid for seeing what's very obviously in plain sight, it's just not going to work.
Like, under any circumstances... The Black Myth Wukong was painted in the same colors as some of the other games that we've seen this year. Even games that had controversy. Pal World, I mean, that game...
Again, Dragon Age the Veilguard rated higher than Black Myth Wukong. If that's not evidence of a bias, I don't know what is. It is very, very clearly a bias. Fucking joke. Paid, that's why. Yeah, no, I'm literally being serious.
Game got absolutely...
Space Marine 2 got the same rating as Concord. How does that happen?
Shredded by games media. They hated that game even though the players liked it. But even still then, I don't feel like the game got dogged on this hard. Going back, Helldivers 2, they went through their entire controversy. Games media didn't even want to touch it. They didn't even want to talk about it. They just brought it up slightly and then walked away from it. Just let the game...
I think that I'm going to come out with a conspiracy take here, but it seems like the way that people and games journalists cover Sony games is more biased, and I'm concerned that there could be some access journalism that's happening in the background that I'm not aware of. Because I've seen a lot of instances where different journalists and different people that are involved in games have had relationships and they've used words that are extremely soft on Sony products. And I just feel like, again, if there's enough points on a graph, you can't blame me for drawing a line. I'm not saying that there's something bad out there that's happening, but it sure seems kind of interesting.
Gamers be mad. And I think the reason why is because they just didn't see it from our perspective. They didn't care to see it from our perspective, which then brings me around to this idea that when it comes to a game like Black Myth Wukong, or even maybe
you guys bring up a good point about Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is a point against what I'm saying. Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's important to keep that in mind. I'm not right about this 100% of the time, but it's enough for me to be concerned.
Like Space Marine 2, probably less so on that one. I think that there are some writers, some journalists that are out there that see that these games are being used in a culture war, that they are diametrically opposed to whatever the side of that culture war is, and they do not want to give them a win under any circumstances.
Yeah.
And that does affect their review at the end of the day. They don't want to hand that over to them. They know that they're going to use it as ammunition against them, and they're never going to hear the end of it. And as a result, well, points get docked, the image of the game gets smeared, and this is the result that you get. I don't know if that's going to be the end result of all of this, but it looks like it is.
Well, the end result of all of this is that these companies will go the way of Kotaku. Kotaku has had to do multiple layoffs. They're pretty much laying off everybody, and they're basically speed running their own careers. Eventually, there won't be any more games media outside of maybe a handful of YouTube channels, etc. And the ones that still remain will probably only remain because they're being kept on life support by their better components on YouTube. And so, and the reason for that, by the way, is because they're spreading misinformation, and what they're saying isn't accurate towards the perspective of a lot of people. That's the reason why. It's not like they're dying. I think that this is a natural outcome of the market, but I think that they are accelerating that outcome with their behavior.
One thing the reviewer, the writer, did get right, there's a lot of games to be vying for a spot as Game of the Year this year.
It's crazy.
A lot of games deserve it. We've had some awesome games release, and there's still more that are right around the corner. Stalker 2 is, I think, next month. We just had Call of Duty. Black Ops 6 just came out recently. That game got reviewed really well. It did really well. The players seem to really like it, which is crazy for a Call of Duty game, but stranger things have happened. So who knows? Maybe there's something else that's sleeping in the wings that we don't know that's going to come out and get a bunch of 10s and 9s.
I hope so.
Anyway,
I really
thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to share the video with your friends. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what game you think is going to be Game of the Year, or what game you want to be Game of the Year. And outside of that, my friends, stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Make sure to catch me in the next video. Catch me live on Twitch, and I'll check you guys next time.
What's so funny to me about this is that how is it that
Again, make sure to check out War Thunder using my link in the pinned comment or description below. With new vehicles, a massive new update, and bonuses for new and returning players, it's the best time to play the game. Thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video.
Of course.
Not ever.
Just a minute. Let me go ahead and look at this here. I think that it's very obvious that they worked in unison to try to delegitimize Black Myth Wukong. I do. I feel like it is a conspiracy. It's like, I'm the kind of person, like, I try to be as much of a logical person as possible. And when I look at how things occurred and, like, what the pattern of behavior was, why? The reason why is because of the way that every single game review talked about points that were the same, but that were all wrong. So, like, here's a really good way to tell whether a story is accurate, and also here's another good way to tell whether a story is shared between multiple people. It's, you look at individual details and you see how many of them line up and how many of them don't line up. And so, like, in order to tell, like, whether somebody is telling the truth or lying about something, or whether people are working together with something, if you look at certain types of language and certain phrases that are used and certain points that are made, and if you see these things happening over and over and over, in a lot of cases, that probably indicates that there is some degree of collusion or some degree of bad behavior that's going on in the background that you might not know. So it's probably more simply plagiarism. No, and I think that you make a great point with plagiarism if people are using the example of return to form with Dragon Age Veilguard. I don't think that that's enough, but what I'm talking about are entire sections and focuses about, like, for example, like the not having women in Black Myth Wukong. Like, this was referenced in like a bunch of different reviews, and it's not something that it seemingly anybody cares about outside of the reviewers. And I think also the accusations that were completely completely baseless, that were made against the studio that made Black Myth Wukong being referenced by other video game companies or publishers, or sorry, journalist companies. And this is the way that they create power, is that one of them makes a lie up, and then the other ones reference the lie, and then other people reference the reference, and then the lie becomes codified into fact. That's how people do a journalism nowadays, and I think it's a huge problem. And yeah, I do genuinely think that I think it is a conspiracy. I actually do. Like, I try to be a logical person. I try to be a reasonable person. And I look at how this happened and the order of events, and there's no way that I cannot come to that conclusion. So yes, I think it is. It's that simple. Welcome to today's media journalism, all of it. Yeah, and you can look at the way that they treated Hogwarts Legacy. You can look at the way that they treated Stellar Blade. You can look at the way they treated Concord, and you look at the way they treated Dragon Age Veilguard. All of these things point to the same direction, and I'm the crazy one for noticing it. No. Nope. Not gonna happen. I see it, you see it, everybody sees it, and we're sick of being told that we don't. So that's what I think. Great fucking video. I love this fucking video. This is amazing.